Quick disclaimer, Dan Schneider didn't have a Discord account, and he had a Google Meet instead, which is why the audio quality is bad. You're going to hear Joku's keyboard sounds throughout the entire thing, and I have to record the first 6 minutes of my audio in post, which is why some of it might not... It might sound weird for the first few minutes, but it'll be okay. Okay, roll the intro. What's up, little comers? It's Composting, the most electric show online. I'm your host, as always, Radistroza. I'm here today with my grounded co-host, Joku.
We got a shockingly good episode today.
And today, we're joined by the one, the only, a man who needs no introduction whatsoever, Dan Schneider.
Not the fat guy who was drafting teenagers.
I thought I could get past you without more of an introduction than the one, the only, you know. Just, except you're quick. You're a quick thinker, Dan. That's why I call you Dan the Man. But you are one of the first film critics online, having started a website called Cosmoletica. Is that how it's pronounced?
I started the website Cosmoetica in 2001. I started a Cosmoetica YouTube channel. I do interviews called the Dan Schneider Video Interviews. I just mentioned before you started recording, I was just interviewed an Australian rock journalist about a 1970s rock band in Australia. And so that was number 422. I've done lots of videos and film reviews and essays about art and the terrible shape it's in.
It's actually your YouTube channel that we found you through. We watched one of your reviews. We quite liked it. We watched it. We reacted to it on stream. I think it was your
the Solo video.
Yeah, the Solo video. You said it was. You said it was worse than the average porno film. Would you like to expand on that?
Well, I mean, it's a dull, boring film. I mean, I'm not necessarily against showing a bunch of scat fetishists and people who are into masochism and sadism, but it's goddamn boring. Paolo Pasolini, the Italian filmmaker, he was a bad poet. Number one, he was a poet before he made films, and then. I mean, he's got another one with Terence Stamp, a well-known British actor from the 60s. I forget the name of it. It's also similar. It's also quite bad. And so, I mean, yeah, I mean, if you're going to do something, I guess the modern term would be he was trying to be transgressive. It was just dull as shit. I mean, if you want to do something violent and you want to do something about the fucked up state of humanity, I mean, I just recently rewatched a week and a half or so ago a film called Repulsion by Roman Polanski. It's about this woman, Catherine Deneuve, who goes out of her mind. She was probably molested as a child, and she ends up being a double murderess. And it's real good. And if you ever saw the Sight and Sound Top 100 Films list, they have a film, Jeanne Dielman, which is about a woman who also ends up becoming a murderess, but it's twice as long as Repulsion and not even half as good, even though they say it's the number one film of all time. But it's a lot of shit.
A lot of shit. Would you like to give us a top 4 rundown? Where are your topsters?
Well, my favorite film of all time is not a great film, although I could argue it's a great children's film. It's Godzilla's Revenge. It's about a Japanese latchkey kid in the late 60s who's left home alone They recycle a lot of the 1960s silly Godzilla films where he battled a giant lobster and that kind of thing. Godzilla is, and his son is a character called Minya who has this odd voice in the American version where he's like, "Hey, how you doing? I'm a Minya, Godzilla's son. Look at Godzilla." But it's better than the Japanese version, where the Japanese version is it's like the worst kind of unintentionally bad Japanese accent you could imagine.
Yeah.
But it's a good portrayal because it's about this little boy who's 6 or 7 years old who's picked on by bullies. He ends up beating the bullies because he sees in his mind, his dreams, Godzilla's son beats up his bully. But underneath the current underneath it was that Japan was going through a financial resurrection after World War II, and both parents were working. So this was over almost 60 years ago, and they're talking about kids being left to their own devices. And one of the devices being left, there's this neighbor who lives next to the kid. Ishiro is his name. Well, Ishiro also foils a bank robbery, a couple of dumb bank robbers, very much like Home Alone, except 20 years earlier. But the main possible villain is this wacky toy maker who lives next door to the kid, because he might or might not be a pedophile. He looks at the little boy a little too long.
Yeah.
No, I'm serious. And so I grew up in a very Goodfellas kind of neighborhood, Martin Scorsese with that, Italian mafia kind of bullshit. And, it's a film that resonated with me because, I would see, every other month that someone was murdered, someone was shot. I remember one time playing in a vacant lot with some of my friends and seeing this naked woman covered with blood running down the street, and a big sedan came up, pulled her into the car, and took off. And so that's a film that has a personal resonance to me. But as I always say, there's a difference between objective quality, and you can be objectively, you can find things in the arts that are objectively good or bad, but what I like is different. If you've ever heard of Ingmar Bergman, he was a great filmmaker from Sweden. He's a great filmmaker. You want to see a film that's great, watch Persona. It's about two women and their psychological connection with each other. And he's just putting his dick right on the table and saying, "You can't beat me. I'm Ingmar Bergman. My dick is bigger than yours." A lot of Bergman's films, they don't resonate with me personally. But I can step back and say, even though I don't like it, I'm not drawn to it emotionally, I'm the guy with the fucking fantastic filmmaker.
We're actually we're having a Swede on very soon, and we're going to be reviewing Persona for the show. We're doing a Swedish episode. But
Bergman has maybe 15 or 20 films that are just flat out great, and it ranges from the I mean, if you want to, if you want to see a film that's I don't know, is the term queer normative that shows that kind of stuff, watch his horror film. What's it called? The Hour of the Wolf, because the vampires in that are odd, they're off, but they're not like classic vampires, but they're not quite at the kind of vampire level if you look at something like the Rocky Horror Picture Show, which came about a decade later.
There's a long history in terms of vampires as allegory for queer folks. But you mentioned the Goodfellas neighborhood. I never told this story on the show before, but when I was like 5 years old, my grandfather's fiance was babysitting us. The marriage ended up not working, but she kept babysitting anyway, right? Her ex-husband was involved in a armored truck robbery. It went wrong. They didn't end up splitting the money. Someone didn't get paid, so there was a big crime family split. So what happened is they ended up, in order to threaten this guy's ex-wife, they put a decapitated deer's head in our garden, which just a very odd intimidation tactic. But
well, it comes from The Godfather. The horse, it might Was it the first? I think it was the first Godfather. It was the first or second one where they put a horse's head in the
In
bed.
the bed, yeah.
Yeah. I guess deer are a lot easier to come by in urban upstate New York, but yeah, you are a poet. You're a big writer, right?
I've written lots of things. I've done 100 plays. I've done thousands of poems. Did about 1,400 essays for Cosmoetica. I've done a couple dozen novels and a few hundred short stories.
Now, you mentioned on the show something that we both wanted to hear more about. You wrote something called The Wigga. Would you like to tell us more about that?
Well, maybe you guys are too young. I don't know. You're probably, 25, 30 at the oldest. Back in the 1990s, there were a lot of odd things. For example, this is where the term, before there were dating services online, there was a thing called bi-curious females that was big in the early to mid 90s. And there was also these white kids who were sort of like Eminem. They go around, pretending they were black. So white, and I'm not going to use the N word here because
Shalom, thank you.
But white N word, smush them together, and you get that. And usually these were sort of like little. I guess a lot of them would now be considered incels, who wanted to be cool, and they do the finger thing with the rap, and oh, I loved Eminem when he wears his underwear stuff, and it's
like culturally appropriating black facets of culture without the proper context.
If you want to appropriate something, read some great black writers, read great black poets or whatnot. But I mean, it's like if I went to Mongolia and tried to pretend, whoa, I'm down with Genghis Khan.
I feel like Dan Schneider, you could get down with Genghis Khan. I feel like you and
Genghis Khan. I think back at the turn of the century, they're doing all these most influential and most this of the last 1,000 years. I mean, Genghis Khan is one of the most fascinating figures in human history, and I think if you remove him from the last 1,000 years, there's not a single person that if you removed, the world would change more. Because if the Mongols had succeeded in conquering Europe, there'd be no Islam, there'd be no Christianity, and no one would be here in America except perhaps the Mongols.
He's up there with like Napoleon and Hitler in terms of effect on human history.
And you can't forget Alexander the Great. He was worshipped as an absolute god. And you want to talk about queer history or anything? I mean, Alexander the Great. This was before there was the stereotype of homosexuals, having the gay accent or something. It was Alexander and the Macedonians weren't skipping through the Levant and the Anatolia to conquer the Persians. They were fucking leaving masses of dead people in their wake.
They were tops.
What?
They were tops.
Well, Alexander was. His boys were probably not.
Yeah. So what was the Wigga? What you wrote? You had mentioned it offhandedly on the show.
I mean, I don't have the poem in front of me. People ask me this. It's like I just said, I can't remember every single character I've written or every little plot thing. But it was part of, I believe, a series of poems called Le Bestiaire, where I would have the something. Like I have a poem about the barber, the actress, the something or other, where I would. I think the actress, I used Gwyneth Paltrow, the actress at the time. This was before she was putting the goop up her vagina.
Did you see the candle that smells like her vagina?
I've heard about it.
It's like I wanted to get one, just because that's funny. Except it's like $500 on eBay. They're all bought up and they're being sold secondhand. It's messed up.
She's totally out of touch with reality. This is this is what when you look at someone like Gwyneth Paltrow. She's one of these people that the people who support someone like Trump point at as being idiots, and she is an idiot. I mean, not that Trump is any better. In fact, he's far worse. But it's like she's such a goddamn moron.
Well, it's like not to get too heady, but I mean people talk about blue MAGA in certain circles. I do think it's a real thing in the sense that they're both MAGA fascism as well as American liberalism are both metaphysical ideologies that ignore the material to a certain extent. I see Gwyneth Paltrow as that framework taken to its logical extreme, whereas QAnon is the opposite side of that coin.
Well, this is why I vote third party. I don't vote Democrat or Republican because I've said the Republicans stand for evil and the Democrats stand for nothing. And Kamala Harris aside, I'm not I got fooled by Obama, and I'm one of these people that Obama, he promised to support unions, he promised to support this, that, and the other thing, and he didn't do that. And go ahead.
As a wobbly, I can tell you firsthand, Obama did a lot more harm than good for unions and workers' rights holistically. A lot more bad than good. I don't know.
His major accomplishment is of all American presidents before him, who were all mass murderers. Obama was a mass murderer, but he did it with pinpoint precision, virtually.
And melanin.
What?
And melanin.
But I think if there is, I'm not religious, but if there is an afterlife, he's going to have to answer for it every bit as much as Andrew Jackson did.
Yeah.
What he did, American Indians.
Did you watch the DNC
No. I'm not. I follow. I'll probably either vote Green. I like Jill Stein, or socialist. Last time, 4 years ago, there was a guy named Howard Hawkins who was running for the Green nomination, and he started acting like Hillary Clinton, refusing to let some minority people within the Green Party. This shows you how fractured it is. This is why nothing ever gets accomplished, because so many people are so divergent, and people, instead of bringing together good ideas. If you look at 60 to 70% of people support universal basic income, Medicare for all. Take college tuition reimbursement. Most people are pro-abortion, and I say pro-abortion, not pro-choice, because what are you pro-choice? Are you pro-choice about abortion? And so on and so forth. But most people don't want to stand behind it. They're all scared to talk about this or that thing. And I live here in Texas. I live in the Austin area, so it's not as blue as not as red as some of the rest of Texas. But one of the things you get, I'm 59, I'm going to be 60, is not everyone, you can be fucked up in one area, but be good in another. I've known people, for example, who were quite bigoted, but they were very good parents in the sense that they were good to their families. They didn't abandon their children or whatnot. And I've also known people who've had, quote unquote, good left-wing people experience. I had a good friend of mine 20 years ago who told me he was not attracted to black women. I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "Well, and he went on to describe what black women." I said, "Well, I understand why you're not attracted, but what you're describing is Aunt Jemima. If Halle Berry was in your bed, wouldn't you get it?" He go, "Oh yeah, well," I said, "Well, what's Halle Berry? She's not a Swede." "Oh yeah, but she's Halle Berry." So even this guy who called himself a blue dog Democrat or yellow dog Democrat, he'd vote for a yellow dog instead of a Republican, still had in his mind bigotry. So this is one of the lessons you have to learn, is everyone has biases. Political bias, religious biases, sexual biases, artistic biases, scientific biases, which probably do more harm than all the other biases. But you have to learn. Most people are fragile. We live only 75, 80, 85 years if we're lucky. And within a few generations, human beings are trending upward. We're fucking up the planet, but if we can get beyond that, I think the future is actually pretty bright. But I'm there again. So.
Well, pessimism of the mind, optimism of the soul. But you, in our email exchange, you mentioned that you wanted to talk about a indie documentary your friends are making about a great poet friend of yours who was, quote, a mentally ill alcoholic and drug addict who is a woman's nylon fetishist.
Yeah. His name was Bruce Ario. He died in 2022. Ironically, just to give you a background, I met him in 1993. He was about 10 years older than me. He had been in a traumatic brain injury. He was in a car accident. And he went from being in law school to ending up being homeless. I don't know if you've ever been to Minneapolis, but it has what's called skyways, which are bridges between buildings so you can walk in the winter.
Like in New York.
Yeah. So anyway, one day he decided to while he was in the skyway, and he was he stripped off all his clothes and went around naked, urging people to have sex with each other so that Jesus could return. He finally ended up getting help. He was diagnosed as a schizoaffective personality disorder or whatever. He had been a drug user, an alcoholic. He did have this fetish for nylon, but then he joined a church, the Hennepin Avenue United Methodist Church. This is a very liberal church, and this is one of the things people get. I mean, I'm not religious regardless, but being religious doesn't mean that you're a right-wing nut that wants to, reinstall slavery. He then spent years doing that. He went to Sierra Leone, he went to India, he went to Haiti, would help build houses after hurricanes, that kind of thing. He worked with something called Tasks Unlimited, which helped mentally challenged people and stuff get jobs. But he had a very narrow creative ability. He only wrote one great novel, which was his life story called City Boy, one word. But he also wrote these poems called arios, which were 10-line poems, 4 stanzas, 3 lines in one, 3 lines in the second, 3 lines in the third, and then a single poem. Like I said, when the film is almost done, so Alex Beramet and Joel Parrish, who have done the film, I'll tell them and send them this link when you get it up. They'll send you the film, but it's about an hour and 3/4. It does use quite a bit of his poems, and it's about the art, because the only reason you're going to watch something if you're interested in the arts is to know about the art generally. But if you look at documentaries of even whether it's famous people or not so famous people, most of the time that's overlooked. So he was someone who overcame a lot and became very good, if not great. And I'd say he's a great poet. That a lot of people do.
Yeah. That sounds like a very interesting and contemporary story with a lot of modern artistic people spiraling out in terms of mental illness. I mean, that very, very hopeful story in terms of being able to turn that around. Very, very good. But what would you consider some of the best directors making movies today?
Probably the best living director, and again, I've not seen every movie and whatnot, but the Turkish director Nuri Bilge Ceylan, he's fantastic. Now, most dumb Americans will call his films slow. Winter Sleep is a great film. Once Upon a Time in Anatolia is a great film. And out of the 9 or 10 films he's done, I'd say probably 6 or 7. Another great film, Climates. His last film, which is a long film with the words pear tree in it. I forget the long title, but it's about a possible pedophile, actually. It's about this guy who's a teacher in a small town in Turkey who becomes obsessed with this young girl. And for most of the film, he's trying to deny this. But in the end, we find out how he had this active fantasy life about this 12 or 13-year-old girl that he taught, even though he never acted upon it. So it brings up an interesting conundrum: is pedophilia in and of itself a bad thing, or only if you act upon it? I've never had any hankering for younger people, but if if I were suddenly found a 16-year-old girl the most beautiful thing in the world. Well, as long as I'm not acting upon it, is there something wrong? I would argue, yeah, you should be able to get beyond that as you age. But some people, I guess, get stuck in a rut. But the real thing, whether it's criminal or not, is if you act upon it.
Well, yeah, I guess it's just sort of a distinction between rule versus act utilitarianism, or essentialism. But I'd like to think that it's good to engage beyond that level. But I guess I would make the argument that it is morally wrong insofar as antisocial behavior holistically is morally worse than non-antisocial behavior. However, that's something that can be fixed, so it's not an essential failure.
Well, it might seem a picky point, but I sort of chafe at the idea of moralism. To me, I think we as creatures have evolved an ethos, whereas morals are tended to be brought down on high by so-called gods. This is why you get a lot of people who will say, well, if you don't believe in God, anything's possible. I can go around raping and killing. No, because you have evolved ethos. Yes, there is going to be the tricky little monkey who hid extra bananas from the rest of his pride, and maybe he was able to get more offspring. But that's something that through tens of millions of years have evolved from our ancestors. It's not because some god sitting up in some throne up in the clouds is telling you, well, it's wrong to find a little kitten and bash its head against a stone wall. So when we talk about morals, I prefer using the term ethics because that's more within the humanistic framework.
Yeah, I would be inclined to agree. I've been reading a lot of Bordiga lately. I don't know if you're familiar.
I'm sorry?
Bordiga, the Antonio Gramsci, right?
I've heard the name. I mean, I'm not particularly big on most philosophers. My sort of feeling is philosophy is ideas, art is ideas in motion, and I like to take them and put them to, if you want, a utilitarian bent.
Yeah. Unfortunately, a lot of Gramsci's ideas of hegemony were put on display in Salo. So, if Gramsci's philosophy in motion is Salo, maybe you're not a big fan, but he's a Marxist who argues against moralism. I'd be inclined to agree with his philosophy. So. Yeah, I will agree with what you said in regards to moralism, but yeah, that director sounds quite interesting. I've heard good things about Once Upon a Time in Anatolia, and I'll definitely check out.
Well, the fellow who did 12 Years a Slave, I haven't seen the latest few films of his, but he also was quite good. He's named after the other movie star from the 70s. What the hell is his name? The black fellow from England. 12 Years a Slave. He won an Oscar. Oh God. Anyway, but he's someone. So with living directors.
McQueen?
Yeah, McQueen. Right. That's right. Yeah. Living directors. Most people default down to someone like Christopher Nolan, and I think Memento years ago was good, but I think a lot of his films have gotten too slick. I mean, it's been years, for example, since Martin Scorsese made anything great. Yeah. Woody Allen, it's been over 30 years since his great period ended. Francis Ford Coppola, my wife pointed out, he's in some controversy now for his Megalopolis movie because the company that is promoting it used fake quotes from critics ripping earlier works to try to make a point. But he's someone too that it's been decades. Art is generally something that comes from the youthful mind. But once you hit the 40s or 50s, most artists tend to level off. you have to keep challenging yourself. And as you get older, most people get lazier. That's the challenge. I mean, I'm sort of like an exception to that kind of thing. This is why, for example, I mentioned this guy I interviewed earlier this morning. I was saying it's been 40 years since the Rolling Stones had anything worth any value musically.
Yeah.
This is why the top records and singles are dominated by young people.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's very true that genius is often fleeting. I think there are obviously a few examples of exception to that. Like David Bowie would come to mind. I consider Black Star one of his best albums, in terms of just being a standout of making a magnum opus at a older age. But then you see artistic geniuses like Kanye West would be the number one example in my mind, who just they completely falter past a certain age. Obviously, a lot of that has to do with his mental illnesses and the illness that is fascism.
I was going to say, I think his problems go beyond artistic.
Yeah. But yeah, definitely true. Who would you consider the greatest contemporary director, Joku?
You mean like the best?
Or your favorite? I think favorite is
My favorite is probably Michael Haneke. Do you know?
My wife is a big fan of him.
Yeah.
Yeah. We
We just watched Funny Games. This was Rose's first time with the Haneke film.
Yeah. I believe his name is pronounced Hanukkah, though. I mean, I'm from German.
Yeah.
I should have caught that. I speak a bit of Yiddish. That's my
favorite film
are
of his is
Yiddish is 90% German. Basically, if you have a lot of the sh sounds, like my name is Schneider, you can bet that's from the German. It's gutter German. My parents, my adopted parents who raised me, they spoke both regular day-to-day German and also Yiddish. And when they were saying something they didn't want me and my sister to hear, you'd hear a lot of Yiddish words with sh in it.
Yeah. That growing up, my father is Scottish Jewish, which is funny because that's like 7 people in total. And my mom was French Canadian, so whenever she was upset, there would be a lot of very guttural French cursing going on, like "tabarnak, sacrément," just ugly. Quebec accents are deeply ugly, but what were your thoughts on Hanukkah?
I've only seen 1 or 2 films, and it's been years. Like I said, my wife watches a lot more movies than I do generally because I work in the evenings, so it's a little bit more difficult. And I also do a lot more things in terms of writing and stuff.
Yeah,
he has a bit of free time, but so I've only seen 1 or 2 things, and I think he's a good, solid director. I can't go beyond that.
You a fan of Wes Anderson at all?
Yeah, but neither the Andersons, him or Paul Thomas Anderson. I think again they're good, solid directors, but I don't think they're in a league with the best that Scorsese did, the best that this Chalon did, the best that I'll tell you, the best film that I've seen in the last decade was actually made in the 70s, and I hadn't seen it. It was Orson Welles' The Other Side of the Wind, which is a fucking amazing film. If you've ever seen Chinatown, you know John Huston, who played the bad guy in that. He was a film director himself. Huston is also in this film by Wells, and it was made when Wells was 65 or 70. And contrary to what I just said about youth, I mean, this is 1970s. He's doing fucking films with 1.5, 2 second cuts, the way a hack like Michael Bay was doing it, but he's actually telling a great story. If you haven't seen it, it was reconstructed for Netflix in 18 or 19. And it's a fucking fantastic film, and it's actually I would argue better than Citizen Kane or some of the more famous films. Orson Welles is I would have to say I think he's probably the greatest director that I've seen. because he did it with big budgets. He did it as a hustler on the side. It took him like 10 years to make this film and have keep the same people together.
Mhm.
So for me, Orson Welles, Stanley Kubrick, they're probably the two greatest American directors.
Yeah. One thing I enjoy about your style of critique is that I often think of being a fan of something is filling the social utility that religion once filled in societies before the one in which we live today, where there's a certain set of principles that you have to agree to, and being a film fan, if you disagree with those, it's sacrament to heresy. And I enjoy the fact that you're willing to make the statement that something is better than Citizen Kane, that you're willing to, even if I disagree, critique Pasolini's movies. I think that sort of honest criticism is increasingly rare as it's treated as paramount to heresy.
Well, honesty is a good thing, but I'll go with quality over it. For example, people will talk about, two characters in the scene, they were talking real honestly. Well, you can talk honestly, but you know what? If you listen to most people, live humans like yourself, if you're sitting in a restaurant and you listen to people talking, most people talk very inanely. They're being honest. They're honestly shallow. They're honestly inane. They're honestly stupid. They're honestly that. But art, if you're talking about art, you want to grab someone's attention. So if you have two people speaking, and I think I saw a video recently. What director was it about? But anyway, instead of the cutting back and forth between two people in a conversation. Oh, Tom Cruise. Hi, I'm Tom Cruise. Oh, hi, I'm Nicole Kidman. And then going back, pull back and show the people in a full one-on-one looking at each other and see where they go. That's what that. Even if you don't have the best dialogue, though, two actors can make the most banal writing, even if whether it's intentionally banal or just accidentally banal. Two really good actors can make something of that because they've taken over the artistic reins from the director in that moment. And this is something that a lot of people don't seem to get: is intent doesn't matter. What my intent is, if I wrote this poem about a brontosaurus being attacked by an allosaurus 120 million years ago, or whether I'm writing about Benito Mussolini being strung up like a big side of ham after World War II, that doesn't matter. My intent doesn't matter. If you don't get something, then I failed as an artist. Or maybe you failed as the recipient of the art, but there has been some failure then.
Yeah, I think that's very well said. We tend to treat art as something metaphysical when, in my view at least, is a material exchange, a material communication of ideas in which an artist's conception is conveyed to the reader.
And that is, it's communication at its highest level.
Yeah.
If all I want to tell you is, I believe in A, I don't believe in B, maybe I believe in C, put it on a fucking bumper sticker. You have to pretend there's something deep, whatever about it. Getting back to my friend Bruce Ariel, if you get to, and when the film, my friends send you their film, you'll see some of these poems that Bruce did, and they're very plain spoken. He's not doing the over the top these or that. He's not doing like the slam poetry. Ooh, I'm
preaching from the mountaintop.
With the constant, I mean, this is performance. That's different than the poetry, but it's something that will confront you right to your face, and it can be done very simplistically. A lot of people aren't going to be able to do that, though. There are things that, if I tried to be, say, a ballet dancer or something, I'd fail because I don't have good hand-eye coordination. I'd hurt someone, if not myself, trying to do that. So you have to know your own limits and what you can do. Now, if you're talking about writing, I'll put my writing in all of the venues I mentioned against anyone else. But you have to know who you are, and most human beings don't. There's a very strong vein of self-delusion that human beings like to have, and this goes on at work. This goes on in private relations. This goes on in political discussions, and even in things as silly and ephemeral as talking about a baseball game or the upcoming NFL season. As I've grown older, for example, I don't care that much about sports anymore. Yeah, it's interesting. The Olympics were interesting because there you can see who can swim fastest, who can jump the highest, who can lift the most. You're pushing the boundaries of the human experience. But if you're just a dozen, or what it's 22 people on a football field, 22 big fat guys, rolling around on the ground after a ball, it doesn't excite me the way it did. I think Eleanor Roosevelt, the former First Lady, said something along the lines that great minds think of ideas, average minds think of events, and bad minds think of people or are obsessed with these things. And if you look at today's culture, I was just watching some idiotic videos of stuff about Trump and Robert F. Kennedy III and Jr. And it's like, these people, who cares? These are just a bunch of old women gossiping. They're not saying anything of any value.
Very funny story. The second most popular video on our YouTube channel is on Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And intellectually, he is beneath me. He is beneath the average person. And there was nothing for me to engage with at a critical level in terms of the political positions he was laying out. And I'm Jewish, so my choices in life were banker, professor, lawyer, or comedian, and I chose comedian. So I just used it as a time to make fun of Robert F. Kennedy. And very, very funny. The video is at 98% dislikes, and it's all just Robert F. Kennedy fans in the comments section, just writing essays on how I insulted their god. It's quite sad, but
this is why I don't allow comments on YouTube. I probably have early on wasted too much time. I've got more important things to do. If you're really that moved by something, you can easily send me an email. You guys send me an email if I said something about this, that, or the other thing, whether it's Israel, Palestine, or the Ukraine-Russian wars, or whatever, and you wanted to yell at me, you can write an email to me, But it's so easy to just send off these things. This is why it's ridiculous. Remember, speaking of Jewish things, remember about 5, 6, 7 years ago, there was that bombing at the Pittsburgh synagogue, and Ann Coulter had wrote on Twitter. She was basically praising the death of Jews, and I basically said, you are they banned me, kicked me off of Twitter. She's advocating or supporting murder of people because of something, and they kicked me off. And you see the same thing now with in the Israel-Gaza thing. People talk about the anti-Semitism, and there'll be anti-Semitism, but what you'll see is someone made fun of someone in London, and then you'll see, but 3,400 people were killed in Gaza, and you'll see the same. You see the same cartoons. There's this site Quora that asked me to write for them some years ago, so I still occasionally send something to them. That is just a hotbed of anti-Arab racism because they have pictures that are virtually identical to what the Nazis had about rat-looking or vermin-esque kind of Jews. Now it's the Palestinians, and the truth is, 98 to 99% of Palestinians, they're basically Homer Simpsons. Most of these people who are said to have this opinion or that opinion religiously, they're like Homer Simpson. They're snoozing in the aisles. Most of these Palestinians don't give a fuck. They just want to live. And
I don't like their Huey P. Newton. He gave a speech on this. He said, people talk about grand political ideologies, but when your house is on fire, what is your political ideology? Getting out of the fire. When you're thirsty in the desert, what's your political ideology? I need water. And I mean, when there's a second Shoah going on in Gaza. What's your political ideology? Not fucking dying.
They won't even have a political ideology.
Yeah.
They'll just be fanboys of an idiot like Elon Musk, who I think is even worse than Trump, because people actually think Musk is smart. Most people don't even think, even most of Donald Trump's fans, I think, really know he's sort of a con man, but they hate the other side. But someone like Musk, this is a guy who literally advocated for nuking Mars. That wasn't hyperbole.
Yeah.
He said, let's nuke Mars. Well, imagine if they're below the surface, that there are actually Martians. Maybe they're nothing more than insect-like things, and maybe they're not. But we're gonna nuke a whole world just so that you can make a profit in 30 years or something. This is the whole kind. I don't want to get into a whole sort of social, socio-political, economic discussion, but I think you can probably guess where I would side.
Oh yeah, of course. And what you were saying about Zionism and the weaponization of anti-Semitism, I would make the argument that Zionism is and always has been an innately anti-Semitic ideology. Like the founders of Israel said, our greatest friends are the anti-Semites. Israel wasn't founded out of the goodness of Britain. It was founded out of the deep anti-Semitism of Britain and the anti-Arabism of Britain, and wanting to get the Jews out.
It's very easy to just look up on Google, and you can see scientific papers that show that Proto-Arabs or Paleo-Arabs have been in the Levant between 60 to 120,000 years ago. Mm-hmm. Jews have only been around for 4,000 years as a people. They are probably an offshoot people of this, that, or the other thing. And people often get mixed up between they think all Arabs are Muslims, they think all Muslims are Arabs, and so forth. Yeah. But I mean, the whole thing is probably never going to be solved, and it's because of England, who never had a right to the land, who took it from the Ottomans, who never had a right to the land. And you can go back, 6,000 years or something, and even the ancient Israelis conquered the area, but there were all these Arabs living there. Now, are we going to be able to move 8 million or 10 million Jews out of? It's not going to happen.
I mean, you can't measure or quantify race. We tried, and that was the eugenics movement. That was skull measuring. Yeah. It's completely socially constructed, and you can't. People are hard to categorize. I mean, you look at gender, for example, and each anthropology, every field of biology, sociology, all of these fields have a different conception of gender, just because it's something, gender and sex, because it's something so hard to quantify or pin down cleanly.
Well, I worked with a trans man who was worked hard then his way up to being a grocery manager. I work in a supermarket. And one of the things people will say, well, they can't reproduce and whatever. I said, do you not think that your average trans man or trans woman, especially if they've had an operation, doesn't realize that they can't reproduce naturally?
Wait, what the fuck? I'm just figuring this out. Dan, you're telling me I can't get pregnant?
Yeah, and
I gotta keep trying.
But it's like, my question is, one, why would you care about these other people doing that? And number two, most of the people who have an issue, I say, but aren't you the person who, with zero proof, believes that there's a divine being out there that controls every aspect of our life, that we don't have free will? What's more outrageous? Someone that you think is wrong because they were born with a penis and they think they're a female, or you who live in a materialistic world, as far as we know, yet believe there's some God out there, some deity. To me, it's a lot more likely I'm going to meet a Bigfoot or a Loch Ness monster than God. So aren't you the one who's farther out of your mind? But now people would say, well, see, you're anti-religious, you're against. No, you want to believe religion, go ahead. I don't care what you believe. Just don't force it on other people. Don't tell women they can't have an abortion. I knew women. I escorted women to an abortion clinic when I was a teenager. I knew a girl who had a miscarriage. I stuffed her little fetus inside the top of a Coca-Cola bottle and buried it on Rockaway Beach.
Oy.
Not many people, not many human beings can fit inside of a Coca-Cola bottle. That you know, you
Yeah.
know.
Well,
So
my cousin might be able to. He's a very small man. But yeah, you're completely correct. I had a conversation with my uncle, one of the biggest pieces of shit I know, at a family gathering. He's a defense contractor, if that tells you anything about his moral leanings.
he's probably
and-
making bank.
Oh
bank
yeah,
these days.
he was talking about how we need to invade Iran next.
Companies are making record profits, ripping off people and saying, "Oh, it's because of the pandemic." No, it's not because of the pandemic.
Yeah,
I worked for in and out 40 years in retail. I can tell you, the people are being gouged in ways they don't know, and no one really cares about it. You know why? Because most people are satisfied with looking on their cell phones. They're satisfied with their little TikTok videos about this or that celebrity, and they don't think. They don't want.
we
to
have
think.
no
They have
sociological
all they want.
imagination.
I'm sorry.
We have no sociological imagination in this country. And I've given academic conferences on economics. I'm very familiar with economics, and Occam's razor, man, the simplest answer is the correct answer when it comes to these record profits and prices going up. It is in the interest of the bourgeoisie to make more money, so they squeeze the proletariat, falling rate of profit, yada yada yada. Prices go up just because they want to make more money. Simplest answer. Complicated reasons behind it, sure, but very simple. And I asked this uncle who responded to a conference I gave on economic planning in Chile in the 70s by saying I should read Ayn Rand. So that's the intellectual level. I've read Ayn Rand. Fucking moron.
But putting aside her ideas, she's just a terrible writer.
Yeah.
She has no ability to craft characters. And the fact that she was a total hypocrite, I mean, is almost superfluous because she's such a terrible writer that I don't even care to wade through any ideas someone who can't even form convincing sentences says.
And you want to talk about bumper sticker writing? There you go. People say that the left has a problem with that, and I'd agree. However, you want to look at bad bumper sticker fiction. Look at Atlas Shrugged. Look at God's Not Dead. Look at all of the schlock the right is making. But I asked him. He's been transphobic towards me, a snide way, very drunk. I asked him if there's a machine that someone could go in and change their gametes and just change every atom in their body and become female in every single way imaginable, would that person be a woman? He told me no. I asked him why. He says, because it's not. It's just this metaphysical thinking.
Here's the thing. I mentioned I worked for a young woman, then now man, and I remember having a conversation, 20 minutes before the shift ended, and I was finished with everything, and he would look up to me and ask me about things about art and whatnot. And I said, I'll bet you that by the time you're my age or near your deathbed, we will have the ability to microgenetically, using little robots, nanobots, whatnot, to actually do that. That you will be able to over 6 weeks have control over the body and the hormones, that you can actually do a 99.9% physical change without operations. And I said, but I'll bet you what's going to happen is there will be a split between in the trans community from people who will say, well, why are you doing it with the nanobot method and not doing it with the old-fashioned operation? And there'll probably be some political schism, because this is what human beings do. It doesn't matter how you get down to just 3 people in a lifeboat. You're going to have 2 people wanting to kill each other, and the third person being able to decide, well, which guy am I going to help kill the other guy? People will always divide themselves. It's balkanization down to the last man. Or woman.
Well, I mean, it's a common joke in leftist circles that The left-wing infighting, they're infighting on their way to the gas chamber, and the Trotskyist crosses his arms smugly as he dies, knowing that his niche micro-ideology was more correct than the left communist and Marxist-Leninist that he's dying next to. It's just childish lunch table engagement.
And
with politics.
this is why I don't like someone like a Noam Chomsky, is because Noam Chomsky basically poo-pooed the deaths of tens of millions of people in communism. And I know the counter argument. Capitalism has killed probably several hundred millions.
Well, he defended Pol Pot, who was
and defended Pol Pot, and it's
like he was a fucking CIA plant.
you cannot, and it goes back to the Israel-Palestine thing. How can you, for example, look at what's happening to your average Gazan, if you want to call them Palestinian, whatnot, and have in your background have had your grandfather, or your great uncle killed by the Nazis, and not see the parallel? How can you then also say, well, it was terrible what the Japanese did to the Chinese. It was terrible what the Germans did to the Soviets and all their satellite nations. But Stalin, well, it wasn't real. There's a guy, what the fuck is his name? He's in Chile. He's a YouTuber.
Oh, Bad Empanada.
This guy.
He beefed with our friend. That's so funny. Oh,
he's an apologist for communism and all the horrors. And again, my personal opinion is right now human beings have not evolved to a level where communism would work. And I don't know if they ever would or will, or would it be good. I think the model that, for example, the Nordic countries follow, sort of social democracy, is probably the best we have right now. But this Bad Empanada, well, he has several videos where he makes excuses for Che Guevara, and it's like, dude, he's using the exact same, although on the other side, arguments that people use to support a right-wing mass murderer.
And like I think that I'm a Marxist, and as materialists, we should be able to engage in materialist analysis of previous, even if only in name, socialist experiments, without it being clouded by dogma. And I think I don't think that you have to fall into the often right-wing trap that just because one guy called himself a socialist and boiled babies, just because that guy called himself a socialist, that means that you have to defend it. It's ridiculous. The Nazis called themselves socialists, and I'd argue that they were as socialist as someone like Pol Pot, for example.
It's like arguing that Ted Bundy was really a good guy because he worked on a suicide hotline when he was younger.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. And like and again, you don't need to do this moralist bullshit where you have to come to the conclusion that Stalin is a good or a bad guy, Lenin's a good or bad guy. Like, if the moralist game doesn't work, because how you quantify that number of people killed? Well, how many people would have died if a more incompetent military leader had led the Soviet Union during World War II? It's ridiculous. What you should be able to do is engage with the politics of it and say, this is what was done right, this is what was done wrong, this is what can be learned, this is what can be done better, and describe it in materialist terms. But you have guys like Bad Empanada, and I would make the argument a lot of Marxist-Leninists holistically that take this dogmatic approach that's anti-Marxist.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not. I'm a believer. Judge people by their actions, not their words. Words are very slippery.
Yeah, I would be inclined to agree. But yeah. Where can people find you?
Didn't you want to show a video?
Sorry, what?
Rosa, didn't you want to show a video?
Yes, I did want to show a video. Thank you for reminding me. Let me pull this up. We wanted to show you a short film, and get your reaction to it. It's very popular among the youth. It's called Skibbity Toilet. I don't know if you've heard of this.
No.
No? Okay.
What the heck?
Okay. I'm gonna start sharing my screen. Alright, let me pop this out. Okay. Select another screen.
I believe it's at the bottom. It says present now.
Oh, I know. It's just here.
Okay, I see the skull. Okay, there we go.
Okay, you see this?
Yeah, I see it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I'm just gonna play the 1 minute 6 second in full and get your thoughts on it.
What the heck is going on you? What the heck is going on?
What was that?
I can't hear it.
Yeah, I
Oh, you
can't hear
can't
it.
hear it? Oh, goodness.
If you can't get it going, that's fine. My wife is sort of giving me the evil eye. She wants us to get going somewhere. I mean,
okay.
what you could do is maybe like in 6 months or early next year, follow
Sure.
up with me and you can show me that, and we can
Sure.
continue the discussion after the fact.
All right. Well, it was great meeting you. Thanks for coming
Thank you.
on.
Thank you for coming on.
Sure.
Thank you.
Like I said, just let me know, and we can do it again. Maybe if you want to do something after the election or in the new year or something.
Lovely. Well, have a great day. It was nice having you.
Yeah.
Take care, both of you. Bye.
Bye.